Hello, y'all. I am back on this exercise bike, ready for another video. So, this video is going to be about when someone says, well, did you see it? Especially when a narcissist says it, right? Or if someone's at that time acting narcissistic. So, what happens in these situations is, look at it this way. Okay, I'm going to give you a perfect example. Look at the cases where you have people that have starved to death. And I mean literally like starved to death, y'all. And a lot of times it's cases where the children are very young children, because they're not of age where they can report it. So what happens is, when there's a bunch of dynamics, I'm just going to kind of break through every angle of this, right? So you got to remember this, okay? I want you to listen to this very carefully so you can understand this. And a lot of times people are jealous of y'all too. See, you got to understand how jealousy and envy and gaslighting really works. So remember, gaslighting in general is a playing with your reality. It's a very non-validating situation to be in. So what happens in these situations, a lot of people are hurt, especially children. So what I do is I create a pattern with people to where I understand their pattern. So my pattern is understanding longevity and who this person is in my life. And I'm going to just be honest with you. And this ain't to brag. I ain't got a bunch of liars in my life. So, for example, okay, say there's starving children. Okay. You start getting these calls. These calls are coming from different angles. Some of y'all get calls from different states. Okay, well, these kids that are living on this country road that are isolated, they're being starved on this particular farm or wherever. They're isolated and they're being starved. So a lot of times with these cases, and I've watched these cases, especially when children are starved to death. I mean, you had one family where they had the kids chained to beds and stuff. All the kids was super skinny. It was just weird seeing the old family photos of them. So what happens is, those kids that was being chained to those beds and stuff, it was like 10 to 15 of them. It was a bunch of them. They were in a upper class, middle class neighborhood, beautiful, big new homes. And a lot of the neighbors noticed that the kids didn't come out a lot. They hadn't seen them in a while. They didn't notice any of the kids leaving for school and things like that. So what happens in these cases, there's a lot of years that go by because the reports aren't made. So somebody doesn't report it because it ain't their family. They don't want to get involved. They ain't exactly seen what's in the house. So those kids were being starved and beat and chained to a bed. And they were an upper class, middle class neighborhood. And a lot of times the report isn't made because the people in the neighborhood, they don't consider that a low class area or a low income area. So they don't think, or they don't want to understand and realize and accept that abuse can go on amongst billionaires. Like, there's no income status for a bunch of kids being abused. So when someone says, did you see it? And they question it, if they're coming from a position of empathy, that might not be so bad. But see, this is the thing. Who's calling and giving you the information? Who's coming to your house and giving you the information? A lot of people are knocking on your doors, telling you things. So, and they're venting and reaching out. And what happens is, when you're trying to explain stuff and the conversation becomes narcissistic, you know, a lot of times the first thing they'll say, well, is it your family? Does it make a difference? You could have very well have known this child since they were very, very young, 5 and under, 2, 3 years old, sometimes 4 years old. Sometimes you've known this child since birth. So, number one, it don't matter if somebody's being starved to death or there's some kind of abuse going on. It doesn't really matter if they're your relative. Number two, it also doesn't really matter if you've seen it, if somebody is contacting you that's seen it. And I'm going to give you a pure example of this. Many, many years ago, when I was in an abusive marriage, okay, and I share bits and pieces of my experiences. And as a disclaimer, not all men do their wives like this, okay? So I don't stand in a belief system that all men would cold-bloodedly take their fist and black their wife's eye. The men in the family that I was raised around, in general, did not treat women that way. However, when you marry a damn psychopath and a sociopath and a freaking narcissistic ass man, this is the shit they do. So I like to come up with real examples. So when I was in this situation, this particular man took his whole fist and blacked my damn eye. Okay, and I mean it was black. Now, when it was reported to my grandmother that is now deceased, may she rest in peace, she did not need to see my eye. I told her about my eye, and she had also received another report that it had happened. I'm not sure who contacted her at the time, but I think at some point somebody called her that it saw it. And also when my grandmother confronted my ex-husband about it, he did not deny what he did. And that was probably because she helped raise his ass too on some level. I mean, he was employed at her business when he was a child. So he did not deny it at that time, even though later he may have denied it in a court of law and stuff like that, but it never went to court for that particular incident. I'm talking about later in the years. So what happened was, in this situation, my grandmother did not need to see how black my eye was for her to understand that my eye was blackened, and she threatened that man's life. She said, look, I'm old, I'm retired, I don't mind doing the rest of my little time that I got on this earth in the penitentiary. This is how my grandmother came at this man. She was very upset and she felt very violated that this gentleman, my ex-husband, would do that to my freaking eye. Okay, so thank the Lord I got out of that situation and I removed myself at some point from that situation. I took a lot of losses because, of course, when they can't black your eye anymore, they're going to go after other things. So now they're going to go after your finances. They're going to come for your kids and you're going to be stressed out. You could potentially have a nervous breakdown. I mean, there's a lot of elements. I mean, and you got men that didn't even get the black eye. They just literally get a bullet in their head. We just had a man that was murdered by his wife in cold blood on a Facebook Live. Just murdered this man, set him up. And some of those are in some of my playlists. And I think I did another video about that also. But yeah, so this was a man. So he got worse than a black eye. He was coming home, packing his things. He didn't want to argue. He wanted to go on and go to work. He wanted to get a cool off. He wanted to get out this violent situation. She wasn't just letting it go like that. So she shot him in the back of his head. His babies and children crying, daddy, daddy, daddy. So what I don't do on this channel is make it seem like this shit just happens to women. I'm fortunate that that's all I got is the black eye. That psychopath could have put a bullet in the back of my head too. But I didn't stick around for the circus. Okay? So in turn, what I'm saying is when someone says, well, did you see it? So what they're doing also is invalidating. They're being very invalidating to all the calls that are coming through. They're also invalidating your relationships that you have with good people that are not liars and things like that. People that have a good track record with telling the truth. Okay? People that are not shit starters, that are not regularly complaining, that have legitimate things. I mean, you're talking about people with good souls. So, and also that comment, well, did you see it, when the narcissistic person is saying this, does not help the victim. Because a lot of times, some of the most legitimate complaints come from people that didn't see it. Another example that I'm going to give is some videos I saw where people were being kidnapped and they were kept in basements. And at some point, they get free and they start knocking on the basement window. Yeah, the neighbor don't see the torture. They don't see that they're bleeding and stuff like that because they can't see through the window. But they hear that banging. And so they report to the police, you know, I hear someone or something banging on that basement door. I don't know what's going on, but this is what I hear. So, did you see it? Does it matter if I saw it? Not really. Not when legitimate reports are coming into your phone or your door or into your office place, and the people that are reporting this information are legitimate good people with good souls. So what do you do about it? What you got to do is this: get another opinion. So with the professional, and what that professional may say is, you know, you might want to report this because if you don't get involved with this situation, and another good example would be elderly abuse. So, okay, I'm going to throw it into the elderly abuse example. So say, for example, you know about an elderly abuse situation. Some calls have came in. This elderly person has bed sores and all of that. You didn't see it, but these are legitimate reports. So you make contact with another professional and you say, what should I do about this? And that professional says, well, you know, if you don't report it and that elderly person dies, that caregiver is going to be charged and can go to prison for murder, because that abuse victim that's elderly is being abused by the caregiver. And so by you reporting it, then you could save the elderly person from dying up under their care, and you could save that caregiver from going to the penitentiary for murder. Now, that caregiver may still get some time for elderly abuse, but a lot of times they don't even go to jails and prisons for that. I don't know why. I watch video after video of elderly abuse victims and their caregivers straight up getting off for it. And I mean, these caregivers, and some of them are nurses and nurses assistants. They're actually working in real hospitals, skilled nursing facilities, and nursing homes. And they are letting them off for it. I don't know why, but that's what's happening. But what they don't let you off for so freely is murder. So you get this advice, and you're advised to report it. because you could be saving this abuser from doing prison time. That's very good advice. And it doesn't coincide with that did you see it concept. So I deal with people here and there, and their perspectives are amazing to me. And a lot of times their perspectives are just so unprotecting of the real victim, which could be a child or an elderly person. And it's just like when I said earlier, what if my grandmother would have not said nothing to this man, and she said, well, I don't see it. Now, what happened was this. Okay, when my grandmother told that man what she told that man about keeping his freaking hands off me, the abuse, as far as the violence, that kind of came to a halt until she died. Once my grandmother died, he probably felt as if my protector was gone. Who on earth would be willing to put a bullet in this crazy ass man but my grandmother? So it started back up. It ramped back up when my grandmother died. That's just something I noticed. I noticed that the aggression came back because my grandmother was not around. And keep this in mind, my grandmother lived out of town. Okay, but this is what he didn't know, was I don't need my damn grandmother to keep protecting me. I finally protected my goddamn self. Okay, because I just wasn't put here for that. And I think my grandmother defending me, just having somebody that will tell somebody, look, you touch my relative again, I'm willing to put a bullet in you. What that does is that teaches your relative that they are valuable, and that someone loves them, and that they are worthy enough not to have some ninja hidden on them. And that's just the bottom line behind that. So at the end of the day, and no disrespect towards men, I'm just using ninja instead of calling this gentleman something more graphic. I'm beyond that. I'm just using it as an example, along with, I built up trust, y'all. As I get more and more comfortable with my channel, I share things about my past here and there, so you would know I went through some things, and I'm credible in a lot of different areas to give you legitimate advice, because I thank the Lord my grandmother didn't say, well, I didn't see your eye. You ain't gotta see it. My eye is fucking black. Like I told my grandmother, my eye black as some shoes, Grandma Nettie. And so she was like, oh, no, he didn't. So, and I just really thank the Lord I don't have to live like that no more. Like, that's hell. That's hell. Bottom line, I mean, that ain't no heaven on earth, being in that situation. So be careful with people. If you are reporting something that somebody has told you, and someone is asking you, did you see it? And basically they're kind of like saying this: since you didn't see it, don't report it because you didn't see it. That does not help the victim. And it's also not validating and showing respect to the people that reported it to you, that are not shit starters. And that's what a lot of narcissistic people will do. They will make it seem like, well, I don't see how you deal with all of that. What am I dealing with? You don't sit in your home and plan to get a knock at the door or this phone call of someone telling you what happened, right? You can't plan for that. It just happens. A lot of times there's conflict of interest involved. And a lot of times the people that are reporting it to you whether they knock on your door and tell you about the abuse that's going on with somebody, they're actually fearful to report these situations. They're fearful of the violence that could come from someone in that family if they report it. They're fearful of losing some sort of friendship that's involved. A lot of times people don't report it because they don't want to deal with any reporting agencies because they have felonies and misdemeanors and they just want to have nothing to do with any law enforcement, child protective services, adult protective services, reporting on what could be happening with elderly abuse. They don't want to have anything to do with it because there's a discomfort there. And I just want to add this. In the United States, I don't know how other countries work, but as far as our rights in the United States, don't you let a felony or a misdemeanor or any criminal conviction stop you from making a report. You have just as much right as a felon in America to make a report if you know about child abuse, elderly abuse, abuse of the handicapped, people that are born with disabilities. You have that right. And actually, and I'm not a lawyer, but I think this is how this works. You also have a right to not answer the question. If they ask you about your background, you can decline to answer. I'm making this report. I'm not calling you to discuss my background. I'm calling to discuss what is happening to the victim. Because to report something to Child Protective Services or Adult Protective Services, or some states have a separate elderly abuse line, or even, let me point this out, to report someone as a missing person. I was just watching a video where a lady reported her client. She was a beautician, and her client hadn't got her hair done in about 2 to 3 months. And she was the one that ended up reporting that lady is missing, even though that lady had family. Imagine your beautician reports you missing. And I think when she made the report, the police said, well, you got to be able to let a client go. Let a client go that doesn't come back to you to get their hair done. But actually, that lady ended up being murdered. Okay? So thank goodness that the beautician was also a good friend of hers too. But time goes by pretty quick. Sometimes people don't come for a couple of months to get their hair done. That might have been her normal routine, but then other people started asking about her, and so the beautician was the one that made that missing persons report. So I'm saying this to say this. Someone that has a felony on their record or a misdemeanor, yeah, they do this bullshit with not letting y'all vote or not letting anyone vote. And I think that should be illegal. I think that voting should be for American citizens. I live in the United States, so voting should be for American citizens. Oh, and by the way, I want to thank y'all that watch my videos from Germany, the UK, and then I have some Asian people that are tuning in. My analytics kind of tell me what percent of people watch from different countries. I'm finally at 70,000 views total. With YouTube channels, and you're a small YouTuber and you're a content creator, you can't be basing your channel and continuing to upload videos based on the views of each video. You can't. You got to keep looking at your total views, because the average views of each video is usually going to be anywhere from 2 to 5% of your total subscribers. And I don't focus on subscribers because it ain't no sense of having 1 million subscribers and nobody watches my videos. Okay. And another thing that motivates me and keeps me going is I saw a lot of YouTube channels that I really was fond of that stopped uploading on their channel. They stopped uploading videos, and I'm like, wow, I wish I could watch more of their videos. However, they disappeared. And you got to remember this. Some YouTubers disappear because they die, y'all. Because a lot of these YouTubers, they were kind of elderly, and you just don't see them no more. So he or she could have easily passed away. Okay, so you got to keep in mind, it's not that people disappear because they don't want to. Something happens to them. Some people may become incarcerated. Just because we YouTubers don't mean we ain't got locked up. If you don't hear from me no more, I'm dead in jail or in the hospital. But even if I'm in the hospital and I can speak, I would still upload a video if I had my device. However, I might be in the hospital for something more serious where I can't speak. I could be in a coma, right? So let's just keep this in mind. So just be careful when someone says, did you see it? Because if you just report things only based on what you see, there's a lot of people that's not going to be saved. Information comes to you because the Lord wants you to do something about it. And a lot of things that you do something about ain't based on what you see. Not all of it. So I hope this helps kind of give you a perspective that just makes it easier for you to understand why people do things that they do. And another thing too, sometimes y'all are speaking to people that are not actively helping people enough. And so they may not understand the position that the Lord is putting you in to do something about it, because a lot of times they don't see you as somebody that the Lord is using. And that is the jealousy and the constant gaslighting that happens to empathic people. Because a lot of times, if someone's being narcissistic, and sometimes it's another empath that don't even understand it. However, most of the time, if someone's working in their full empathy costume, they don't think like that. Like, it's irrelevant whether you really saw something or not when someone is being harmed and is being reported to you. And just tell the truth. If it's an elderly abuse situation and you report it, let the social worker or the case manager, whomever you deal with, or the authorities know that you were told this is happening. You know, make an honest report. Say, I didn't actually see it with my own eyes, but these people that are reporting it have been legitimate, sound-minded people, very empathetic in my life, and I don't think they would be telling me a lie. And just report it as it happened. Don't ever lie and say you saw something that you didn't see. I'm not recommending that at all. However, you will be put in positions to report something. And as I said earlier, don't let a criminal record stop you from reporting severe abuse, because you have a right, and that's a blessing that the Lord will give you in return. Because remember, anyone that has a felony or a misdemeanor or any kind of conviction on their record, that's your past. That don't mean you can't save somebody today. Be free of your past. Don't let a criminal conviction make you feel like you cannot report something. And I don't know what rights people don't have in other countries. You know, maybe in some countries if you have a criminal conviction, you're not allowed to report things. However, I've never heard of that. So I'm encouraging anyone, no matter your background, to report things. And sometimes you're going to be mandated to report things that you didn't see because legitimate reports came across you. And so the Lord is putting you in a position. And remember the example I used of the elderly abuse situation where the other professional that you may have reached out to says to you, well, you know, if you reported earlier before this person is killed or dies, you can actually save this person from going to the penitentiary. It's equivalent to reporting somebody when they're threatening to kill, then waiting till they kill, if that makes sense, y'all. So just be careful because, and as I come across things and situations, I'm going to make y'all aware of. So be careful when you tell somebody something. I don't care who you telling it to, male or female. Be careful when they start that, well, did you see it? Especially when they're kind of recommending you stay out of it. Because that does not get the victim any help. It doesn't. Whether the victim be a child, an elderly person, a person that was born with a disability, or someone that does not have a disability at all. That did you see it crap does not help the victim. And as empathic people, we always here to help the victim. That's always what we about. Not all those endos. Did you see it? Did you hear it? Forget that. Okay? And just do the right thing. I love y'all so much. I've been on this bike almost 33 minutes. I appreciate you for listening. Please leave a comment. Please share the video. Please like, share, and subscribe. And thank you. Bye.